Hello malt mates, welcome to the Whisky Bothy, where I review whisky and I also give opinions, perspectives, a little bit of experience. I share, discreetly of course, conversations I have, generally from people who have retired from the industry. And I pass some of that on to you so as that you are a more informed whisky buyer, so you can spend your money more wisely and more carefully for better results. So welcome to Extras, number 1123 Extras. And I'm going to talk about how distilleries often have to monitor and manage their casks to give the expected results to consumers. And before I go any further, I know it is in the description box, but for those of you who don't read the description box, where you will find my Patreon channel, by the way, this is an opinion. That's what it is. It's an opinion and a perspective. So please treat it as such. So many years ago, I bought a 14-year-old peated whisky from a famous distillery, and I was disappointed because where was the peatiness? It was supposed to be heavily peated, but in fact, after 14 years, the peatiness had all but disappeared, and in fact, the flavour was more like brackish water. Now that's water that's been contaminated with brine. And there was a little hint of antiseptic, and that was it. But as regards the full range of peatiness, malt mates, it wasn't there. So I thought, well, I'm going to do what I should do here. I'm not going to panic. I'm just going to put the stopper on the bottle, leave it a few months, come back to it and see how we're getting on. Perhaps it will just sort itself out. And to a little extent it did, but not as much as I hoped for. But I wasn't going to give up yet, because in that period of time I bought the non-age statement heavily peated version, and I literally added 2 teaspoonfuls of the non-age statement, probably 7-8 years, to the bottle of 14-year-old, and left it for a couple of weeks. And when I came back, OMG, WTF, what's going on here? It's as if the peatiness has been reborn in it. It was extraordinary. I needed an explanation for that, so I went down and I spoke to someone in the local pub whose husband worked in blending, and then he gave me a phone and he says, oh yeah, this is what happens is, if you get these older casks that they're not doing so well. That's the technical business term, not doing so well. Particularly if it's a heavy peated whisky. People are looking for that heavily peated whisky experience. And people who are prepared to have deep pockets and dive into these pockets to overpay for older whisky thinking it's better, they still want that phenolic if it happens to be a prominent Islay Monster or Highland Monster or any monster that's heavily peated. And they know that there is a responsibility to fulfill consumer expectations. And I totally get their point of view. I totally understand what they're doing. And one of the tricks of the trade was, at the distillery, if they had a few old casks of peated whiskies which were not working too well, what they would do is they would decant into an emptied whisky cask, usually sherry funnily enough, which had contained younger, heavily peated whisky from the same distillery, but was now empty. What would then happen is that the younger whisky influence from residuals in the cask would then lift up the failing and geriatric old cask and revitalise it substantially. Now, this is something that was done with very careful, tactical precision, which you don't get a degree to do this in university. You can forget that. Right now, that is useless to you in this situation. You need a good nose and experience. You need warehouse personnel who know how to read a cask. They'd be able to look at a cask and almost subliminally sense how fit for purpose that's going to be to achieve the result that they're looking for. And it's amazing. Bear in mind, an empty cask is an empty cask. If you're saying, hey, Ralphie, if that was a 30-year-old single malt decanted into an empty cask of a 10-year-old single malt, doesn't that make it 10 years old? No. Why not? Because the 10-year-old cask was in fact empty. That's why. If you're out buying older peated whiskies, let me give you some advice. They tend to be hell of a expensive, and frankly, in my opinion, they're really not worth the money. They're for malt posers and posturizers who want to turn up, rock up to Fischio, plonk down some vintage 1970s 35-year-old Laphroaig or something similar, and subliminally impress all the dafties around them that somehow they've got this amazing discretionary nose, and they're, frankly, you know, they should just get the Master Blender badge straight out the box. No, not a bit of it. And I know you find this a little bit caustic. It's supposed to be caustic. Maltmates, I want you to keep things real, please. Do not get caught up in the hubris of bling bottles. All you have to do is look at just how much the bourbon collectors have grossly overpaid for so-called hard to find, so-called allocated, so-called rare bourbon, and see and ask them, well, how much is your stash, your investment worth now? And they'll hang their head, they'll look around the room, and they won't give you an answer, because their stash is not worth a lot. It's probably worth a third, if not less, of what it was in the early 2020s, because there's nothing rare about whiskey or any other spirit. It's being made all over the world, every country, all the time. There is no scarcity, there is no shortage, there's none of that. The real challenge is developing our own noses to know what real quality truly is, and importantly, how the makers of whiskey get it there, so that when we buy it, we are far more informed, and that our stash, our investment, which is for drinking, which is the primary purpose of whiskey, end of, then you've got a stash for life. Because you know, anytime you open a bottle, in years to come, you know the quality, you know the provenance, you've still got the receipt, you know what it came from, and furthermore, you know what it's really worth, because it's part of your ongoing phenomenal and unique experience, accompanied by fabulous spirits and whiskey and everything else. That's the real gain. That's the real investment. Knowledge, time, good company. It's not about the money. Money is printed out of thin air most of the time. They just turn the printer and out it flies. Money is whatever the people in charge want it to be, whatever value, just whatever. And if you haven't sussed that out soon enough, you're not drinking enough whiskey and spending enough time thinking. Cheers, mates. I'm going to conclude by saying, see really, really good heavily peated experiences. They basically take two forms. They're always cask strength. They're always natural colour and unchill filtered. Because chill filtration ruins the character of a heavily peated whisky. Ruins it. It thins it out and makes it two-dimensional. There's two particular forms of heavily peated whisky. The first one is the young heavily peated whisky, which is fully phenolically intact and tends to be matured in fresh casks, particularly sherry, wet casks, not reassembled in the production line. No. Intact casks. Barriques, often superb for the job, so long as they've been flushed. In other words, get rid of the wine. Too much acidity in red wine. That's a problem for distillers. So what ruins the whisky is the acidity in it. Got to flush out that wine cask before you put the whisky in to mature. And the other is an old cask, a grand cask. It's been lying around, it's been filled a few times. It's not got a lot of left to give, but it's got enough. And all it needs is time. And you'll find it from the likes of Cadenheads and sometimes Gordon MacPhail. These venerable casks that have taken a peated whisky into 10, 20, 25, 30 years intact. Why? Because they didn't do much. All they had to do was hold the contents without leakage and without evaporation to limit the oxidization and the breakdown of the phenolics in the spirit. And these are the survivor casks, the grand veterans. And this is eventually where we get to. This is why Port Ellen became so famous. It was never a great malt. It never was. It was just blend filler, that's all. But predominantly, because it wasn't valued at the time it was made, it was shoved into tired old ex-bourbon casks, which preserved the phenolics at higher age. Enough information for one video. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you want to know more, I'm actually about on my Patreon channel to have a Bothy Live. I do it once a month, 2 hours, question and answers, additional slight deep dive content. It's where I say a bit more controversial stuff, but all in good taste, no pun intended. Amongst extra videos and extra content now and again, and there you have it. And it's all one price. There's no, different structures. It's all one consistent price, full access. See you soon. Bye-bye.